it's important to communicate that to REC nonetheless. Another one that we really hadn't focused on before, of course, Barb mentioned churches. The other one was putting shelter notice signs up at the gas stations and the grocery store. These are places that people go to in emergency circumstances like this looking for supplies, and would be an additional location where you can have an opportunity to reach them that you might not necessarily do in a radio station type of scenario, or from having a sign up at the rec center, or the community rec center.
We always have packets when school begins too, and look at how many families you'd reach if you put a little blurb in that, and when you send home all the information with school kids. So there's a lot of ways we can get it out. We just have to be proactive and do it, that's all. Get the plan together and do it.
Did you get a lot of help from different organizations and churches? I mean,
did we get a lot of help?
I mean, did you have church groups, ladies groups, Ozani or anybody else help?
No, and I don't think they honestly knew about it. This was kind of a
see, there's just something
go by the seat of your pants at this point in time, because we had to do it. You know, whoever was there had to do it. And we have got along just fine. We had enough help and the job got done. But I think in the future, if you had that plan outlined and you knew who you were going to call, and the other thing is that if the Red Cross gets involved, you know, people said, well, why don't you have the church groups bring in bars or bring in, if the Red Cross gets involved, you can't bring in any food at all. It has to either come right out of a can from the grocery store, or it has to be catered in, because the liability of serving food that might make someone ill is huge. So we had restrictions that we had to go by. So that made it a little bit more challenging.
Working with the Red Cross. It was easy. Working with the Red Cross was a good education.
Yeah, it really was. And they were very helpful. That's where we got the cots and the blankets and the pillows and all that.
Now, one segment of our emergency plan that we did not have to put into place was once the power was out in town, there was a discussion about transportation, of course, to people, to the community center if need be, and who would be the responsible parties. And of course, we had coordinated with the police department and was providing that service. What we were concerned about is if we were hit with a large volume of communication, was to make sure that we had enough volunteers available. Now, there were some private individual volunteers who took steps up to do that. But
do we have a list of those?
The private individuals
that helped. I know who they were.
Are willing to help.
Well, we can get those.
Well, the other side of this, though, is if the demand would have been stronger than the on-site volunteers and the police department could provide, one portion of the plan that was not activated is that the volunteer fire department is our next line of support. And I just had a discussion with Dale today about the fact that we did not feel that was necessary, so it had never been activated, but that I wanted to make sure I reiterated with him that doesn't mean in the future it may not also be the case.
And one thing we have to be really careful about is that if volunteers like you and I go and transport those people, we could be liable if we let them slip on the ice and get hurt. I mean, I think probably it would be a better thing to let the firemen or the police department.
I agree. I'm
just
curious.
Sure. But, that's kind of a scary thing as I see as it was.
Another question with this emergency response plan. Has the hospital ever been involved with any of that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We've been in contact with Michelle Sugut and Mike Ketchum, and communicating with them about what they would accept, what would be sent to us, making sure that between the two that we shared our resources when available, that we communicated with them when our shelter would be up, and what services would be provided at our shelter. So there was a full communication going on with them, the comm center, which basically serves as the county's hub. And we also, of course, were working hand in hand with the community rec center. I mean, they took an active role in this too. That can't be overlooked.
We called the hospital to see if they could take this one couple, and they were full. The hospital took people, the nursing home took people, but they took the people that were more at risk.
Well, I was just curious whether the hospital was part of it in this case.
Yes.
I've heard it. I didn't know.
The Howard Center was involved as well. They have the Harry Rasmussen building, but the generator at that building was donated for use for handicapped individuals. So there's some parameters by which that is actually used. So we didn't get them involved this time, but we can involve them as part of our plan. But they would be another place where people, like we had some people come that had to do breathing treatments. They need to be somewhere. They can't stay at home because they have no electricity. So that type of person we can help. Anything worse than that needs to go to somewhere where they would have a nurse or something like that on hand.
I'd say now it's time to put everything fresh in our mind to do this.
That's why we're going to attempt to do it on Thursday.
City stuff and everything else, the alternatives or whatever it is.
Our first order of business is we know we're going to get hit real quick by FEMA and ICAP to get assessments on cost.
Right.
And it's really unfortunate that they do that because a lot of times you don't have a full assessment when you are going through the process, and so you have to go through and do some rough evaluations. That's one thing Bob and I did this afternoon, is we spent a good amount of time estimating what limb pickup cost would be, and tried to identify what
Take
cost.
what you need, take it times 10 and hand it in.
Yeah, I was told at the meeting today that they needed to have that no later than the end of the week. I'm surprised that make it.
And it's kind of harsh because that puts you in a situation where, especially like today, we're still not out of the woods, and yet we're having to take resources away from continuing to be a part of the process so we can reevaluate what the costs are so that we can turn it in.
I would suggest that if you have any suggestions for this plan, either stop by and talk to Adam or give him something in writing that you'd like to see included in it, because we want everybody's suggestions. That's what really makes a plan good. So
I'll have this on the agenda
open.
again at the first meeting in February, and by then I'll talk about what came out of the managers' meeting, and hopefully if you've had some things that you'd ask me to follow up on, I can present those to you. And I'm hoping also that there is another one of these type of continuous improvement meetings at the county level too, so we can discuss what went well and what needs to be worked out as well there.
So at the county level, will the cities be, visiting with the county at those meetings and to smooth that out? Or?
I would assume those will be managed by Jim Bullock. I
Right.
have not contacted him about those meetings yet.
that's his job. He's the emergency management coordinator, and he needs to coordinate that among the county.
But all in all, I guess the only other thing I would say is all in all, we have, I will reiterate the fact that I think to the outside world, to some degree, we looked fairly smooth in our operation. I will tell you that was absolutely positively not the case.
We got the job done.
We
know how.
had a framework to work around in place through the 9/11, or through the Y2K program that made an immense impact on how quickly we could move towards some of these things, and did some adaptations on the fly that really were helpful in being able to move quickly to provide services.
Is there any other discussion on F?